Okay, so I wanted to make a new tier list video for a while now. I just never had a good reason to. My opinions haven't really changed much, but it's fun talking about these characters. And I think what I wanted to do this time is actually talk about the meta of this game. I feel like you can talk about how good these characters are, but it's kind of hard to understand why these characters are good. And I want this to kind of be a more definitive, hopefully everlasting structure of how this game actually operates on a meta level, right? Rather than maybe just a tier list. So with that, I've made this little handy chart here. You can't see it, but there's a lot of cool stuff here to show off. And normally I go from bottom to top. We're going to go from top to bottom. The biggest shark in this game is Brawler. Brawler beats every character in this game. He has very good matchups. Probably doesn't lose a single one. Maybe he goes even versus Engram. He's like a shark. He just eats everyone. Yum, 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 yum. Um, he's definitely the best character in the game, though. Um, there's not too much to say. He does everything well, and then has really good damage on top of that. Uh, he kind of devolves when he's around. He kind of devolves a lot of the game into beating and playing Brawler, and the meta gets a lot less interesting with him around. So that's why people don't really play him too much. Um, Now, when you ignore Sword Fighter, you actually have a really interesting dynamic for top characters. Engram, Athena, and Scourge all have a core triangle here, where Engram beats Athena, Athena beats Engram, and or Athena beats Scourge, and Scourge beats Engram. Um, Generally, Engram's fast buttons and great movement is can get around Athena's defensive options. Athena's defensive options wall off Scourge and prevent him from getting in. And Scourge just kind of has weird ways of getting around a lot of the threat. I guess both characters are really good at getting in, but Scourge just hits harder. He hits parry as well to get around a lot of his burst options that you can do on reaction. They're really great. Generally, most players will consider either Engram or Athena the best character, and then Scourge a little worse. I think most people have been leading towards Engram being the best, but that's not everyone, and certainly not every. There's certainly some people saying that Scourge is the best of these characters. So it's worth mentioning that these characters are all pretty well balanced in terms of meta impact. I do personally think Athena beats Scourge a little harder than the rest of them, but this triangle is still important, and learning ways to beat it or maybe get a secondary for that. One of the best players ever was a Engram Athena player, or an Athena player with an Engram secondary, allowing her or him to beat everyone with their character selection. So then, in next here we have Tatsuo and Sword Fighter. Tatsuo is in a weird place in the meta when you aren't playing with Brawler, who just does everything he does, but better completely. Um, Tatsuo has this unique place of not really losing too hard to any character, but also not really beating any characters. To be honest, his meta is a little underdeveloped. There's not many Tatsuo players, but generally he really doesn't have bad or good matchups. He just kind of can play everything pretty well. He doesn't have the winning matchups of Engram or Athena, so he's not on their level, nor is he Scourge, who can beat an important character. But he does have his merits of not really losing, which is kind of important. And that gets him a nice solid beat here. As for Sword Fighter actually does beat Engram, but then lose to beat Scourge, but then lose to Engram. And then the Athena matchup is pretty even, if not a little Athena favored in my opinion, but most Athena players say it's Sword Fighter favored. So, agree to disagree. So there also is this kind of sort of triangle with Scourge, but Sword Fighter is a way worse character than Athena is. in most regards. He loses to Retriever, which I'll get to later, but Athena doesn't, so that's pretty good. Um, and he also loses to Engram way harder than Athena does, which is not very good. So, and he also struggles a little more with uh, Tatsuo, even though it's pretty evenish than the other two. And then you also have Bruiser. Bruiser's been kind of pushed by the Bruiser play. Okay, come on. Been kind of pushed by the Bruiser players to, especially Galaxy, to be like good. Um, he's got he's got okay-ish matchups into Scourge and Tatsuo, but into Sword Fighter, Athena, and Engram, the matchups are really bad. He really struggles versus those characters, and overcoming them is pretty hard. From this point on, characters become very polarizing, and really struggle to like have a real place. I think this is like kind of the last like pretty good character we got here, because after this we have the D tier characters, which will be Brick Battle or not Brick Battler, which will be Hexon and Retriever. Retriever uh, loses to everyone except Sword Fighter and Brick Battler. Maybe goes even with a few of those characters. Like maybe he goes even with Bruiser, but for the most part, he does really poorly into most matchups. Um, he does have a pretty good matchup into Sword Fighter. Most characters can't claim that. But at the same time, he just has such low damage that it's really hard to get anything done with this character. And the same issue kind of applies to Hexon, except he also has a really bad neutral. He just kind of loses, and it's a really uphill battle for Hexon. By this point, the characters are pretty bad. You're really not getting much done with these characters, in my opinion, at least. And then finally, Brick Battler just loses to everyone. This character is horrible. It's a really bad character. Playing this character is like forfeiting on round start. You can get stuff done with Retriever. You can kind of get stuff done occasionally with Hexon, but with Brick Battler, it's really hard. I guess even Brick Battler has like his merits. Like Wall, I think recently Wall has been like actually doing stuff, which is kind of crazy to say. He's got okay damage. I think truly, I don't think any of the characters in this game are don't have rather the potential to do stuff. I think the meta is still developing with these lower characters. It's worth mentioning that, Retriever, Hexon, and Brick Battler are some of the least explored characters in this game. And I think that maybe with more exploration they can be better. But right now, at least, that's the current meta, and it's pretty unlikely to change, even if some of these things, maybe some things change, like maybe Tatsuo has a more definitively winning or losing matchup. Maybe the meta gets developed and Bruiser actually can overcome one of those matchups. I don't know, but at the very least, generally, you get the core ideas of the triangle between Engram, Scourge, and Athena, how Sword Fighter beats Scourge, loses to Engram. I don't know why this arrow's here. This arrow's not supposed to be here. I don't know why that arrow's there. And how all of this kind of plays together. So, thanks for watching. Have a good day.